Today's topic, yeah, my brain knows that you're a level 40 wizard, but my heart's just not buying it.
Welcome to TABLEscraps, short discussions about board, card, and tabletop gaming, submitted by the viewing audience and discussed with the viewing audience.
Hello there and welcome to another episode of TABLEscraps, the live streaming show here on YouTube where I, your host, Chaz Marler, discuss a topic about tabletop, board, and card games with the live streaming YouTube audience. And today's question comes from Lucas Morão. He asks, how can I feel more theme? I'm not talking about food or music or an epic soundtrack with the sounds of swords and dragons. It won't make me feel any different than a card that simply says sword and having a plastic miniature in front of me. I don't feel that I'm saving the world in Pandemic or that I'm getting a clue in solving a mystery in Eldritch Horror. There's rules, mechanics, and I like the game if there's gears turning that appeal to me. And I know that there's nothing wrong with all of that, but it's something that I'd like to feel, to be thrilled. It's kind of an arbitrary topic, but if there's some advice for me and the folks in the same situation, I would love to hear about it. It's a very difficult topic, I think, to come across and say, oh, here's the answer. You did mention, more than just foods and soundtracks. So I'm thinking that, there is another idea, but it probably falls in that same boat of not being what you're looking for. But you can there's also room decor, lighting, and that type of settings. There's even smells now. There's a product called Adventure Sense, and I think something else will actually have this sense aromas can fill the room depending on what you're playing. Like if you're playing a dungeon crawl, you actually can have smells of like dank, wet cement and stuff from these little smelling pellets that you can add to your room. So there is that, but again, that is more additional atmospheric environmental types of immersion. And I don't know if that's exactly what you're looking for. I think what you're looking for is to really find a way to have the game grab you at an emotional level. I think that my own personal answer to that is best addressed by a story from my own experience. When I was back in high school and early college, I loved Street Fighter II. A friend of mine and I would play it all the time. He had it for his Super Nintendo. We would play Street Fighter II Turbo just hours and hours and hours. And then we played the 4 new fighters and everything. Basically, if there was a Street Fighter game, we played it all the time. And I eventually ran into the same problem. I remember distinctly, we're sitting in his living room one day and we were playing, and I turned to him and I said, if only there was a way for us to get some more immersion into this game. And he's like, what are you talking about? It's like, well, wouldn't it be cool as we're doing Street Fighter moves and jabs and punches and kicks and things like that? Wouldn't it be neat if we had little electrodes hooked up to us from our controllers? So every time that we got punched, we'd get a little zap or something. That would really help increase our immersion. And without even turning to look at me, or without even stopping mashing the buttons on his controller, my friend just replied, why don't we just put the game down and beat each other up? And that's when it dawned on me that sometimes when you're playing a game, no level of environmental influences are going to have the emotional impact that you're looking for sometimes. Sometimes it's going to come down to and just be completely dependent on the player's own imagination. You're going to have to just take that mental leap and allow yourself to paint your own world and get into it that way. At least that's been my experience. And fortunately, I'm glad to say my friend never did just beat me up for the Street Fighter experience. So that's a good thing. Let's start off here today with a note from Kazan Xie, who posts, wargame, economic, and adjacent, I'll put RPGs into that too, are greater than thematic Euro and Ameristyle games, which are greater than non-thematic Euro and Ameristyle abstract at the base level for the theme integration into games for me. I see what you're saying, even though I said it completely wrong. If you're looking for games that are really going to immerse you in the theme, typically there are certain genres of games or play styles that are going to provide the greater possibility of that immersion happening. War games and such are going to have much more the possibility of getting into a character, getting into a role that you're playing, than a cube pusher Euro game. And so that might be something that's helpful, is looking for a style of game. There might be certain styles that might help you actually cross that border easier. So thank you, Kazan Xie. That's a really, really good point there. Kabuki mentions, it helps if the theme is something that is already established, like a known IP or intellectual property. For instance, Dune is probably my favorite game of all time when played with others who are also in love with the theme and the source material. There's a really good point too, is that having others that are willing to get into the theme will make a big difference. If you're playing a game and you're the only one who's really into it and you're the only one who's taking that leap, that creative leap to get into character, that can really be a hindrance. If you can find a group that you can play with where everyone is willing to really take on the roles, that will definitely make a really big difference in it. Let's go back to Kazan Xie and see if I can read this comment by Kazan Xie correctly this time. Kazan Xie adds, beyond basics, nope, can't read it right this time. Beyond basic, representative components rather than cubes, either Stonehenge-shaped wood or fancy resin bits, that all helps since it reduces processing between what components are and what they represent. I absolutely agree. I mean, that's kind of one of the basic points of the whole component-proponent series. The thesis statement of the component proponent is, upgrading the bits and pieces in our board games to make the experience more immersive and also just kind of have some fun with it. So I think every little thing that you can do to enhance a board game, can help. Now, I'm not saying that it's necessary and that, we got to go out and spend lots of money on all of these upgrades and that's what we should be doing, but it can be something that I have found can, help a little bit more. Scythe is one where I love all the really nice resin bits and pieces and the coins and everything for the version of Scythe that I got, and that, really helps the experience. So I think there's probably a metric ton of other examples for that as well. Jakob joins us to say, for me, getting drawn into a theme really helps when the group gets involved too. Some people just want to play the game to win, while others are playing for the experience of it. That is a really good distinction there, Jakob, and one that I think is a fundamental, helpful tidbit for this. And it's absolutely true. I know in one of the local game clubs I go to, there are people that are perfectly happy and want to spend their time sitting as quietly as possible, staring at a board, moving their resources around, trying to maximize the number of points that they can get to win. Other people in the game club, their primary objective for the day is to come away with it with a really good story. And neither one of those is superior when it comes to gaming than the other. It depends what you're looking for gaming. But I think if you're looking for a more immersive experience, it may be looking for someone who wants to come away from the game day with a story to tell, with an adventure that they had, with some neat thing that happened with the other players and such. That might really be a good group to get involved with for increasing that immersion level. Dustin joins us to post, I feel immersion is 99% dependent on the people around the table. A group of interactive, involved players can make even the barest cube pusher more in-depth. A drink or two can also help loosen people up. So Dustin, there's another voice that also agrees that the people that you're playing with really will have a very large impact on the amount of immersion you're able to get out of the game. There seems to be a consensus there. Whether or not you feel that adult beverages are also part and parcel to help unlocking that experience, well, I will leave that up to the individual viewer. Kazan Xie also adds, some solo games are great at building theme. The Doctor Who solitaire storytelling game, for example, which can have a real emotional impact. Oh, I will have to check out the Doctor Who solitaire storytelling game, because that's a really good point. And that is the antithesis, the opposite of what we've been talking about so far. We've been talking about, the group. But I think it's a really good point that is worth mentioning, that, you know, a solo game obviously is going to have a group of just one person. And I think that also can work because that one person can control how immersed in it they want to get, depending on how helpful the source material that they're working with is. So if you really want to get into the character and the role and the experience, a solo game that's really written well and is engaging could definitely actually be something to experiment with and could be one of the ways to pull that off. So thank you very much for that helpful tidbit there. Kabuki also mentions, I just recently played Seventh Continent with a friend, and he wasn't getting into it as much as I was. He was just barely reading the text on the cards and was just plowing through everything just to get as far as possible, as quickly as possible. Not everyone gets into theme the same way, obviously. That's true. And with a game like a text-heavy, story-driven game like Seventh Continent, I think that the amount of immersion that someone is doing is going to be integral to how immersive the experience is. You know, one player who's not into it could really just, change the experience for everyone. So that's actually, I think, something important to keep in mind. We've been talking so far about one person who is really getting into the immersive experience and the others in the group aren't. It also can go the other way. If everyone in the group is except one person who isn't, that also can be just as detrimental to the level of immersion that everyone in the group experiences. So it is really a group team effort, I believe, if you really want to get into the role and everything like that. Let's go to a comment from Lauren, who says, legacy games help you get into the theme as you are playing it for a while, and the choices that you make have a lasting impact. That's a really good example there. Yes, legacy games. If Risk Legacy did not have that continuity in it that the legacy system provided, and it was just another Risk game, I doubt we would have either played it as many times as we did, and we definitely would not have had the stories like this to tell that carry over from it, I believe. So that's a really, really good point, Lauren. Thank you. Now let's get a couple more comments here. The next being again from Kazan Xie, who also adds, I find it easier to get into theme in games, generally, when it has thematic mechanics and lacks anti-thematic ones, rather than adding paragraphs of text which can feel disjointed from the game. So it sounds that like what you're saying is having logical rules and mechanisms that kind of make sense and are intuitive to the theme that you're playing really are important for capturing or providing the most immersive experience possible. I think that's very true. If you have a game and you're playing every now and then, you'll play a game and a rule will come along or a mechanism will come along, and then you're like, well, I can see from a gameplay engine reason why they did that, but thematically, that makes no sense why we would be doing this. That could totally just reveal the fourth wall and take you completely out of the game right there. So yeah, I agree. The design of the game itself, in terms of its the way that the mechanisms are incorporated into the theme, can definitely help or hinder the thematic experience. Definitely. Kabuki also mentions that someone who is disliking the game or theme can, yes, definitely drag down the immersion of others at the table. One rotten apple ruins the barrel, or the gaming experience, as they say. Moving on to the last comment for today's episode, it comes again from Dustin, who adds, no matter how immersive, it only takes one player having a bad day to draw everyone out of the games. That's why I start my game nights light to get some catch-up chat out of the way. Well, first, I thought that Dustin's comment was just going to be another reiteration of Kabuki's again, and I was going to have to scramble for something to add to it, but fortunately, Dustin was one step ahead of me and added that really good tip. That could be a really good way to allow the game that you want to establish a very thematic, immersive experience to have the center stage to be able to do so. So thank you, Dustin, for taking center stage with that comment. And with it, it's time for all of us, including me, to get off the stage and allow us to wrap up this episode. But if you are watching and did not get a chance to comment or would like to comment later, you are welcome to do so either in the YouTube chat comments below or continue the conversation over on the Pair of Dice Paradise Facebook page at facebook.com/pairofdiceparadise or on our Twitter page area account thing, which is at Dice Paradise. And I want to remind all of you watching that episodes like this are made possible by viewers like you who have been supporting Pair of Dice Paradise's fundraising campaigns. Every contribution for this coming year does make a difference and is greatly appreciated. So thank you all for your support. In the meantime, I've been Chaz Marler, who, along with the YouTube live streaming chat, have been serving up some table scraps. Talk to you again soon. One rotten apple ruins the barrel, or the gaming experience, as they say. Or, as Kabuki just said, and I also said because I'm actually the one saying it out loud. Regardless, absolutely agree. So, yeah, don't be Captain Bring Down in your game group, because it one bad, exactly what Kabuki said. Moving on.